Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 241 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, the Orange Tank Nealon, and with me, as always, are the green and red tanks, Mark and Kellen. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
Gentlemen.
Hi. Thank you. That's what I was waiting for. This week on the show, we're going to be doing our grand return to something that we haven't done in a very, very long time. I think the last time we did this was back in April, as far as I can tell.
The long, long time ago that was but 3 months.
Yes, exactly. 3 months ago. I mean, we kind of broke our regular cadence a little bit. Maybe there was a bigger gap before that in the last one. I can't remember. Regardless, we're drafting. We're going to do a Board Game Barrage fantasy draft. We're going to kick it up another 100 games up the BGG top list. Games number 601 to 700.
This is when games start getting good.
Yeah, exactly. This is where the really, really, really good stuff starts to show up. It's weird. And if you've never listened to one of our draft episodes before, then you may not be aware that you could stand to win a $50 gift card to the online board game retailer of your choice just for voting on which draft selection is your favorite. And you can do that by going to boardgamebarrage.com/draft. But before we get there, let's
if
talk
you're
about...
concerned about how draft is spelled, that's D-R-A-F-T.
The English-speaking audience will totally understand, Kellen. Thank you. But before we get there, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. And this week, we're going to be talking about a little game called Town 66, Akropolis, and Pampero. So let's start with Kellen and tell us about Town 66.
So, first of all, I do not know if, in Japanese culture, if they know that Town 66 is 1 digit away from the mark of the devil. But let that be a thought that permeates you while you listen to us talk about the latest Oink game, which came out this year, I believe at Gen Con or just before Gen Con, Town 66. If you are familiar with Oink games, they are cute games from Japan that come in small boxes. 5 years ago at Gen Con, not many people went to their booth. Now, if you go to their booth at Gen Con, you can't even get in. You have to push past the people, push past the masses, and everyone wants Scout. Scout is winning awards, even though it came out years ago. Who can say what's happening in the world? Topsy-turvy. But in Town 66, you are playing a very straightforward game where you are collectively building a 6x6 town. Nealon is convinced that the cute shapes that you're seeing on the tiles are buildings.
This is inarguable.
I am convinced that they are people with hats. You decide. I'm pretty sure I am right. They come in 6 colors and 6 hat shapes. And the conceit of the game is that you are placing orthogonally adjacent to each other, never diagonal. And you can only have 1 color in each column and row and 1 shape in each column and row. Meaning you may not get to play all of your tiles as you're building outward from the top left corner of your town. That's a little Sudoku-esque, a little, where can I play? There's not many places to play at the beginning, but as you build out into the town, there's a lot of places to play, and then as you get closer to the end, there's not many places to play because no one wants a guy with a blue hat in Town 666, right? And you might say, well, Kellen, I don't get it. This sounds like a cooperative puzzle. What's the game? And you'd be right, because the game comes in the form of 1 rule, which is at the end of each turn, you can, if you want to, discard a tile after you draw back up to your hand limit of 4 and permanently reduce your size of your hand. And if you ever cannot play, you are out of the game. So the winner of the game is the... it's pretty... For a simple game, it's pretty hard.
It is. No, this was the sticking point, right?
Yeah. The winner of the game is among the players who have chosen to do that optional action to reduce their hand size, right? Of the people who have reduced their hand size the most, right? The person who has stayed in the game the longest of those people will win the game. Meaning that if you reduce your hand to 1, and then you bust on the 5th turn of the game, if no one else reduces their hand to 1, you will have won the game. But if a player is able to reduce their hand to 1, then they will have won the game because they played longer than you did. So essentially, the entire game is, should I reduce my hand now? A little bit of a game of chicken. As players start doing that, you go, oh, maybe it's my turn to do that. And if you don't stay in somewhat lockstep, you may be just locked out of winning by virtue of there not being enough rounds left in the game to go. So it is essentially a push your luck game. Neelan, what do you think of the Mark of the Devil?
I thought it was cute. I think my problem with it is that you would think that maybe the game is in the, where are the places I can place at? But that becomes pretty procedural, right? You're literally looking at over your tiles and being like, okay, there's 1 or 2 places I can place this, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room as to like your choices in that regard, especially as the game starts to wind down. But then on the flip side of that, the more interesting choice is what the game is about, which is like, okay, at what point am I going to lower my odds of being able to stick in order to give myself the win advantage? But I just kind of found that like towards the end, you were more often than not just trying to figure out, is there anything I can do with my tiles? Because, you know, that process of going down all of the rows and going down all of the columns and figuring out what can fit in each of those available spots is a little bit of a trial by error type process.
So it's like it does a couple of smart things. One is that you draw your hand back to the full size, and then if you choose to do that optional discard, you're choosing which tile to get rid of. So you do have more optionality there. And then the other thing is that you can see the color of every tile that every other player has, meaning you're trying to, you know, sort of blue, which I assume we will beep the word. I don't know. Have we ever?
I think we don't think we have, but we will be doing so.
Great. Oh, this is a new word? Never before said?
Yeah, this is a new bleep. I'm excited to do it.
All right. Well, I would be trying to make it so there was really no place that blue could be played. And so there are like suboptimal places to play. But it is this weird situation where at the beginning of the game, you're going to get to place. And then at the middle of the game, there's probably some strategic placement decisions. And at the end of the game, it's more just like, oh God, can I play a tile anywhere?
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was a little bit weird about that is that it almost feels like because it's so easy to place in the beginning, it almost feels like the game only starts halfway through, which the beginning just felt an arbitrary setup for the real game.
But in Town 666's defense, everything fits back in the box and closes fairly easily, which is not something that Oink Games has managed to figure out since being in business since 2010. This is not one that I would tell people to seek out. There are many other Oink Games that I would tell you to seek out. And don't collect Oink Games just to collect Oink Games, because you would be as silly as me and you will regret it in a few years. That is Town 66. Save the last 6 and maybe get yourself some 7s.
Another game that Kellen and I played yesterday, and I played a few times this weekend, is Akropolis. This kind of came out of nowhere to be what's seemingly one of the hotter games at Gen Con. I sort of found out later that it had sold out fairly quickly at the Hachette booth, who are distributing it in the US. But this is designed and developed by Gigamech, by designer Jules Missaud. And this is a very lovely, chunky tile placement city builder game. So these are hexagonal tiles, each of them 3 hexes put together. And on your turn, what you're doing is you're choosing one of them from a row to buy and immediately place into your city. The restrictions on how you place them physically are very, very limited, kind of what you'd expect, no overhangs and that sort of business. But what's crucial about how you place them is how they will score at the end of the game. On these hexes are a bunch of different colors, which are referred to as districts of each of these colors. And each of the districts has a very specific restriction on whether that hex will score at the end of the game. So, for instance, the blue hexes only will score if they're part of your largest blue region. So a contiguous region of blue hexes, only the largest of those will score at all. The yellow hexes, as soon as they're adjacent to another yellow hex, they cancel each other out and will not score. But on top of that, none of these hexes will score unless you also have a plaza of the same color, which is, on a separate hex. And those plazas sort of act as multipliers. So you can have multiple plazas which end up multiplying your score for those districts over and over again. One more layer on top of that is that the districts also score more if they're higher up in your city. So if you start to layer them onto like the second, third, or in Kellen's case, I think fourth layer. Is that how high you got?
I go hard, Neelan.
But yeah, so there's a certain amount of rarity to each of these districts and certain amount of multiplicative like benefit based on the plazas. So for instance, the green ones are easier to score, but there's less of them and their plazas are more valuable. So Kellen, for instance, won our game by concentrating solely on collecting green districts, which is interesting that that's a viable strategy. I think that the way that you can purchase the tiles is interesting in itself, and there's a very simple go around system where the leftmost one is always free and each one costs an increasing number of your basic resource, which is stone. And as you buy one in a round, you're effectively making the ones below it cheaper for the rest of the players until you run out the row, then only do you replenish them. So there's a little bit of turn order shenanigans and trying to figure out, okay, Kellen's going to be able to get this one for free unless we find a way to stop him, which is fun.
It feels like a PAX game, Mark.
That's literally a joke I was going to make, but I couldn't fit it in. But
No, it's not a joke. It literally feels like a PAX game.
oh, okay.
But yeah, the joy of building up your city and like the verticality as you start to put the layers on top of each other starts to look really cool. The colors are very vibrant. I will say the scoring is a bit of a bear at the end, but had a great time with this. I think that the bidding purchasing system is simple enough. There's not that much upkeep. It's comparable in some ways to Cascadia, but one of the criticisms that we have of that is just the way that every single turn you're doing a little bit of physical fiddling. They very cleverly offload that to the end of every round in Akropolis, so it just kind of moves very, very quickly. Yeah, I thought this was great. Kellen, what do you think of Akropolis?
I loved it because I won, and I love everything that I win at. No, I really liked the fact that I could win only concentrating on one of the colors, which is not normally how these type of affairs go. Like, usually if you go for broke, it's not possible. And I think that, if the intellect of my opponents had been higher, the go for broke on green strategy would also not have worked, but I was able to overcome them. No, especially what's fun is that because you're stacking on top of things, you might have a predominantly green, but with a yellow as my secondary strategy and then red as a third strategy. And every turn you're having to reevaluate and go, all right, is it time to sell out yellow and just go for green? And that's a fun go for broke type decision. I like this a lot. I think it's really great. I want it, and I agree with you. The Cascadia thing of just having to replace the tile each turn is annoying, and that's just not here. I will say I wonder how much staying power this has. There's not a lot of variety to how it would go, but, there is the variability of who you're playing with, certainly.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, there are also some in designer included.
The V word.
I don't actually even remember the specifics about how each of the districts, I think it's more specific to how the districts get restrictive or how they score potentially. I'm not entirely sure. So probably not as variable as something like a Cascadia where each animal scores completely differently each game, but
that's a dirty
perhaps
word,
some room. Say again?
That's a dirty word that you said, the V word.
Variability.
Don't say it.
Yeah.
I think
I'm sorry.
It's for
the V word.
Neelan, but it's okay. Variability is
what?
fine.
The V word.
This is a dirty word.
Oh,
The V word.
oh, sorry.
The V word.
Is a bad word?
Yeah, can we just, Mark, can we bleep that out?
Oh, yeah, I was going to bleep those out anyway.
Okay, that's good. You can just say the V word
The V word, right.
from now on. The V word.
Yeah, I'll just do a voiceover saying the V word.
And
Hold
that's
on.
the name
Let me-
of the
let me
episode.
take clean take.
you know?
Hold on, clean take. The V word. Okay, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay, good.
Okay, perfect. But yes, ultimately, I do agree with you that I do wonder what its staying power is going to be. I do like those moments mid-game where you sort of feel like you've built the infrastructure, as it were, to go up a second level, but you feel like you have to be sacrificing something. The one thing I didn't talk about is how you get stone, which is there are specific hexes that you just want to cover to get that stone. So there is some element if you could build up those quarries in such a way that they support your second level. But still, the decision of deciding when to cover up your bottom layer to like build higher is very clever.
And then the only other thing, and so there is a dirty little secret. This is different dirty than the V word, but where sometimes I'll make jokes the day of, and then I repeat them on the show for everyone to enjoy, really. It's like a sort of a kind thing that I do, but for everyone but Mark and Neelan. But in this case, I just wanted to say that the player aid is Nealon approved and or Tryhard approved, because it gives you the distribution of every color and every type of district across all player counts. So you don't have to go, how many yellow districts are there in the game, because it's on your player aid, and so people don't have to know how much you're trying.
By the way, that is a great Nealon impression.
Yeah, it sounded just likely. Mark, imagine a game where you have to solve a Sudoku puzzle, like Town 66, and I ask the question, how many colors are there allowed in this row? And Kellen says, doesn't matter, I don't care.
By the way, that was a great Kellen impression.
Why did you ask me that, Nealon?
So you're saying this hangs with Cascadia. This is right in that same, if not better, it sounds like. Because in looking at it in your description, I would worry a little bit about how fiddly/difficult the scoring might be, but not really in practice.
It feels like you just work through it very systemically. It's like one of the things that you have a giant score pad, right? So I'm like, at the end, I'm going like, okay, how many blue stars does everyone
Let's
have?
go over our
What's
greens.
your blue
Let's
score
go-
district?
yeah.
And then you do that, and you just go that every color. You know, like, it's a process. It's a little bit tedious, but it's doable, you know? But yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily give it the edge over Cascadia. I would say that my impression off the bat was I had a little bit more fun with the puzzle of the placement in Akropolis.
Gotcha. And it serves the same audience. It's geared toward the same audience.
I would say so, yeah. They're very similar weights and have that similar visual style and tactility. But yeah, that is Akropolis by Gigamic Games. Mark, tell me about Pampero.
I got a review copy of Pampero, which is hitting Kickstarter on October 11th from Ape Games. Pampero is designed by Julian Pombo, so you got another P there, with art from new-to-the-scene youngster Ian O'Toole. I have to admit that I wasn't familiar with the work of Mr. Pombo, but when my buddy Cameron, who was playing with me, asked who the designer was, and I mentioned his name, he said he was sure that he was familiar with him, but couldn't put his finger on why. It turns out that it's because Mr. Pombo has some level of notoriety for his BGG designer profile picture. I would direct the listener to look it up when you get a chance. Cameron, my friend, described it as like an 80s action star, which I totally agree with. But my first thought was like really, really strong Bruce Campbell vibes for all you Bruce Campbell fans out there. In Pampero, which is the name of a dry wind that blows from the southwest of Uruguay, where the game takes place. I said that despite knowing that Kellen already was familiar with the term Pampero.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
You got it. You'll play as a power company tasked by the Uruguayan government to find a way to efficiently supply power to the nation and its neighbors, despite its struggles to break from its dependence on imported fossil fuels. So, now, if you can tear your eyes away from Mr. Pombo's BGG picture, and I wouldn't blame you if you had difficulty, you'd see that his one published design is Mercado de Lisboa, which is a co-design with Vidal Lacerda, of course. Now, this one credit doesn't quite tell the story, as Pombo appears to have been a long-time developer and collaborator with Mr. Lacerda on his well-known line of heavy games, and that certainly shows in Pampero. Pampero is, at its core, an economic hand management game where, in a very Lacerda-y style, you take a single action on your turn that will, in turn, start a number of gears turning, to use turn again. You'll start with an identical hand of cards as your opponent, and you'll take an action on your turn by placing one of the cards on either the top or bottom row of your personal board. Where you place the card determines which section of the board it's going to apply to and how much that action will cost. And the card itself will determine the action that you take. So if I wanted to build wind turbines, I could play the wind turbine card to the leftmost spot of either my top or bottom row. The top row might let me play in the A or B section of the Uruguayan map, while the bottom row might let me play in the B or C section. The actions you take will allow you to deploy and move bulldozers, which you'll need to build the aforementioned wind turbines or electric towers. The turbines give you power that you need to fulfill energy contracts, while the towers help you increase your income and give you other bonuses. Fulfilling contracts, which isn't the recipe fulfillment that it is in many games, also grants you a stream of income. And fulfilling a contract is, again, really straightforward. You don't need some sort of like combination of some amount of electric energy plus some amount of wind plus some amount of coal. It's just you need an amount of energy which are generated by the turbines, and that's it. You just pay that and the contract is fulfilled. Another important concept in the game is the idea of incentivizing opponents to use the infrastructure that you've built. In order to fulfill a contract in a given area, for example, not only do you need the energy to pay for it, but there also must be some electric tower in the area. Now, it can be your own, in which case you pay the cost to fulfill the contract to the bank, but it doesn't have to be. If you don't have a tower in that area, you can pay a player who does have a tower for the right to use theirs. And so you might try to work things so that you're spending your time trying to control the infrastructure of a region of the map so that if someone wants to take a contract from that area, they need to go through you to do so and therefore pay you. As is the case with Tal Lacerda's games, there is obviously a lot that I'm not covering in any detail here. There are variable end-of-game incentives. There are upgraded cards that you can acquire to make your choices of actions better. Speaking of action choices, there's one thing I should mention is that as you play your cards to the top or bottom row, the cost to play the cards gets cheaper to play. However, you're only going to retrieve one card per round, and the rest of the cards that you've played are basically stuck on your board until you take a full action to retrieve all your cards. So if you want to jump out and take an action early, you have to weigh that with the fact that you're unlikely to get that card back and therefore that action back until you take a full action to gather the cards back. As far as how I felt about the game, it's very, very important to say here that this was a prototype. It seems like much of the components and art are likely near final, and they are absolutely gorgeous and totally on par with a luxurious Lacerda game or an Ian O'Toole classic. That said, the rules are still in a bit of flux. There was one aspect of the game, for example, that we couldn't understand despite combing over the rulebook, and later found out that that part of the game was just not in the rulebook at all. So we knew that there was an action we could take, but we didn't get why, and despite trying to figure it out, we learned later that it just wasn't addressed in the rulebook. That action ended up being quite minor, but just to be clear that this isn't yet the finished article. I liked Pampero. I've heard it likened a lot to Barrage in addition to Lacerda games, and I can see the comparison to Barrage's sort of shared use of infrastructure. I will say that in our couple of 3-player games, and the game goes to 4, we didn't find things necessarily overly tight or cutthroat to the level where we felt we needed to use other players' infrastructure very often, so not as cutthroat quite as Barrage. And this is despite the fact that a number of places are blocked off in a 3-player game, so you're not using the same board quite. There is some spots that are cut out, but we'd like to play it at 4 to see if you get more of that. I think if you're Kellen-esque in your dislike of Sudoku turns, the phrase he's coined, then Pampero is probably going to do nothing to turn you around. I think if I had to throw it into my Lacerda rankings, which is unfair, totally unfair, I think I'd rank it just under mid-table probably. Like middle of the pack, maybe a little bit below like a mid-table Lacerda. I certainly prefer it to, for example, Escape Plan, but I don't think it's anywhere near Gallerist or Lisboa in terms of how I rank Lacerda and Lacerda-esque games. That said, I think if you're Lacerda or heavy economic game nut, especially the former, you're definitely going to want to try Pampero out. It definitely has that single action, sets off a bunch of repercussions thing that Lacerda games do so well, but in a style from Mr. Pombo that is definitely its own thing. It's also, I want to repeat, a gorgeous, gorgeous production.
It just seems like, Mark, we should only be referring to it as Pombo's Pampero every time that's say wonderful. Pampero.
I mean, what a use for a colon. If you could work a colon in there, Mr. Pombo's Pampero or something
Mr.
like
Pombo's Pampero?
Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So now we just need to get our friends who are surely going to make videos about this, like before you play, to only refer to this game as Mr. Pombo's Pampero.
Perfect. We will let Naveen and Monique know immediately.
All right, I'll send them a text.
Perfect.
No, but my question, real question, I know people say, oh, Kellen, you only derail the podcast. No, that's not true. I come up with intelligent things like Mr. Pombo's Pampero, along with Mark. Is there something that you could say, like, it's a little bit more economic than something Mr. Lacerda has done, you know, or, like, how could we see his work evolve? Because for Vital Lacerda fans, you know, like, wow, there's another Vital Lacerda with a jawline.
Right. Yeah, I think for Lacerda fans, it's a no-brainer to at least try. I would say it's probably a little more economic than the typical Lacerda game. I think that's another way that it's similar to Barrage. It also makes me feel in that way a little bit like Pipeline. It doesn't have the puzzle of the pipes in Pipeline, but the economic flavor is there, which you don't necessarily get so much in Lacerda games. There's obviously some economic aspect to much of Lacerda's games, but this might lean on it a little bit more in terms of getting income and sort of an area control thing. So yeah, that's where it's different. It definitely feels Lacerda-y in some ways, but it definitely is its own thing for sure.
There is something like really interesting about leaning on the house style. Like at any glance, this would look like a Lacerda game. And obviously, Tools graphic design is a huge part of that. But I do wonder if Mr. Pumbo is going to be better served by trying to differentiate himself more in the future.
Sure, although, if you're going to be influenced by somebody in the heavy game arena, I think you do a lot worse than Lacerda.
I mean, for sure, I suppose.
And you can also tell that he has developed Lacerda games, not only because there is a Lacerda flavor to it, but because, this is a well-designed game. Like, there's a lot of things going on, and despite the fact that the rules are a bit in flux, this is clearly like a designer who knows what they're doing, for sure. And also, the theme does help. The theme does come through. There is something to be said for, like, building wind turbines that is for creating power to fulfill these contracts, and the electrical grid that you make is providing you income. It's not like the theme comes through, but it does help in explaining and in processing what you're going to do on your turn, for sure, which is helpful in a game as heavy as it is. So again, if Lacerda's or Barrage or Pipeline and games like that are insta-buys for you, you definitely want to check out Mr. Pombo's Pampero by Ape Games, coming to Kickstarter October 11th. And again, this was a review copy supplied by Ape Games.
Before we move on, we are at the beginning of the month, which means that we just put out the bonus episode for August on Patreon. So if you're not aware, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage or boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon. And we put out bonus episodes out there. So the monthly episodes are us just talking about a lot of things which typically are not board game related, although this one kind of leaned more board games. We'll be talking about stuff that we've been watching, stuff that we've been doing outside in the world. But there might also be a little tease for some future coverage of War of the Ring, the card game, on there.
Ooh.
What?
All of your support is greatly appreciated. There's some other fun rewards out there if you're in our Discord. But otherwise, please check out boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon.
The secret channels where we're actually honest.
Yes, everywhere else we're just lying about our opinions on games.
Exactly.
Let's get into our feature topic, which is going to be a fantasy draft of the 100 games from 601 to 700 on BoardGameGeek. The lists are getting weirder and weirder as we notch up the hundreds on this top list. But I think let's get right into it. Probably a little bit of bookkeeping. Who won the last draft?
Almost certainly not me, because I've been on a dry spell. Let me tell you something. For those who don't know, this is like the beginning of the soccer season and the American football season, and so there's a lot of fantasy drafts going on, and so I am like doing a bunch of fantasy drafts, so I feel like I need to redeem myself now. Like, this is a time where I'm in drafting mode, like I've got a drafting headspace, and I've been on a big time dry spell in terms of our draft, so I'm hoping everything comes together for me here.
I got 60% of the vote.
Okay, so that makes a pretty clear-cut Kellen win. So, as is tradition, Kellen, having won the last draft, will get to choose his position first. So, Kellen, do you want to be first pick, second pick, or third pick in what will be a snake draft?
I'm a bold man, Nealon.
Oh, yeah?
What do bold men do?
Bold men go first.
Boom.
Okay. Well, there it is. Yeah, I'm happy to take the second position, I think. I do like the double picks. No, I'm going to go third. I'm going to go
tail of the snake?
Yeah, tail of the snake.
I get the body. I get the body of the snake.
Mark in the middle.
One head, one tail, but I got the entire body to myself. Just the way I like it.
Normally, bold men know where they're stepping. But in this case, I just wanted to say that I was bold, sort of a big boy pants scenario.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, let's get right into it with Kellen's first pick.
Psych. I knew what I wanted to pick the whole time, you dumb people.
Dummies.
No, I actually think that this is a great pick. I don't know. This is an eclectic mix of games. And with that comes an eclectic pick. My first pick of the draft is Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. This is a grail game for many people. Those who love the Lord of the Rings and those who don't. It is a Stratego-like experience that is hard to find. It is designed by one Mr. Reiner Knizia, and it is one that I tracked down and paid way, way too much money for. So if you're putting together a small collection of games, you could do a whole lot worse than the Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. I find this to be an excellent two-player game, one that I could never see leaving my collection, and I spend more time making fun of the Lord of the Rings theme than I do engaging with the Lord of the Rings theme, and Neelan can definitely attest to that. It does help to have a little understanding of, who the White Wizard is and why that's interesting, and Mr. Legolas versus Mr. Pippin or Frodo. But if you love the Lord of the Rings, you will absolutely love the Lord of the Rings Confrontation. Even if you don't love Lord of the Rings, I suspect if you like Reiner Knizia designs, you will greatly appreciate what's going on here. Strictly an upgrade to Stratego for me. The first pick, Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. I dare you to find something as cool on this list as that.
Well, not only am I going to pick a cooler game, but I'm going to pick the hottest game. So I'm going both heat and cold.
Wow.
Both
That's
temperatures.
a duality that I hadn't considered.
I'm going for what I think is the hottest game on this part of the BGG top list. And I'm going with the game that I think is going to be around for a long time as well. So not only is it hot, but I think it has staying power. And that is So Clover. So Clover is, I think, my favorite party game of the last year or two. I don't remember when it came out exactly, but in a very, very crowded field that gets more crowded every day, I think it's a game that really stands out, and one that I think that I'll be excited to introduce to family and friends going forward. So my first pick is So Clover.
Had you played this? I know that this snuck on to Neelan and I's top 50, I feel like, or pretty close to it last year.
Yeah, I want to say it was on my top 50 last year.
I feel like, Mark, you hadn't played it at the time, or I feel like you were excited about it. I don't know if I'd known you'd played it, but someone with better understanding of our own origins may be able to answer that.
I think I had played at that point, but I've played it multiple times since. I think I'd only played a couple times, but it's just a game where I know I can introduce it to anybody, any group, no matter the dynamics. Even sometimes you have friends that are interested in playing games with friends who aren't so much, and it's hard to get a game that works there. I think So Clover has worked for me in any sort of circumstance.
Absolutely. Great pick.
Thank you.
So I know what my first pick is, and let's just do that to do that, and then we'll think a little bit more about the second pick. But the first pick is actually a game I'm surprised that Kellen did not go for his first pick, because I know it's a favorite of his, and I know it's quite... Yeah, Yamatai, exactly.
Yamatai.
No, this
Days
is,
of
this
Wonders Yamatai, which somehow is on this list.
This is 6 Nimmt. This is a very, very cool, very accessible, highly strategic card game. We're playing a tournament of this in BGA right now, and it's actually, I've been appreciating it more and more.
Have you, actually?
Yeah, no, genuinely.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, having now played it a lot more, I guess. I think it's lovely. It's so simple, and it's just, the highs are super highs, the lows are really low. It just has that cool vibrancy, especially when in the times I've played it in person, where you're just screaming every time you mess up and have to grab a bunch of bad cards from the table.
That makes me happy.
I think it's no coincidence that Neelan's appreciation for 6 Nimmt has grown as he's doing well in this tournament.
I genuinely didn't realize I was doing well. That's
sure.
Funny, because I didn't seem like... No, I genuinely not looked at the rankings. I know that I've kind of been doing okay.
I've kind of been doing okay.
How do you not know if you're doing good or not on board?
Well, because the thing is, I don't think I've been winning a lot of games, but maybe I've just been hovering near the top of these games. I don't know.
Also, a good time to shout out the tournament channel in our Discord with a bunch of tournaments run by Mad Rex, one of our listeners who does a great job of organizing a bunch of tournaments. It's been a blast to play.
Okay, so let's think a little bit about what my second pick is going to be. And there's a couple of very, very, very good options here. But I think that the one I'm going to go with is probably going to spike for a lot of very specific people. It's not necessarily the most popular game, but I think that people that like this and like the people that make these games really are big fans of Bus. Bus is a Splotterspiel game, an excellent, actually, I mean this quite genuinely, might be my favorite Splotter game, having now played it more and more. I had a very, very bad introduction to Bus where I kind of felt like I couldn't get anything going. Played it a few more times at Dice Tower West with some people in the Discord and grew to love it. It's very accessible by Splotter standards, at the least, but it still has the same sort of, you know, you're setting yourself up and then just watching the thing unwind, and it either goes really well for you or really, really badly, kind of like a food chain magnate type scenario. But the joy, especially in Capstone's new production of this, I think just looks really, really, really lovely. Yeah, that's Bus.
And might be, you know, arguably the progenitor of worker placement, right? Like, it's at least in the conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So speaking of pillars of modern gaming, Nealon goes all the way back to 1999 because he's old. But there you have it.
I resent the fact that your bad play of Bus came with us.
Yeah,
We all had
exactly.
that first play together, and then you had turned to our listeners, and all of a sudden you love it. It's a shame. Okay, tough call here already. I think So Clover was a slam dunk #1 pick, but now it gets a little trickier.
Like I was an idiot for picking Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation.
Well, I wouldn't use the word idiot, but I might use a progenitor to the word idiot. No, I think that my choice here is going to be a game that I think is appealing to a wide swath of people. I think in this section of games, 601 to 700, you get a lot of games that specific groups like a lot, but I have a hard time finding like games that are universally liked and universally appreciated. So I'm going to go with, I think, one of the few games that fits that criteria. I'm going with Feld's Oracle of Delphi here. This is
Classic.
an unfeldian Feld. It's not necessarily a point salad. You get a lot of Feldian things. You get like a lot of different colors, meaning a lot of different things. You get a lot of different ways to do stuff, but you don't necessarily get a point salad. It's also like a race game, which is interesting. You get a lot of variability that you get with Feld games, but yeah, a Feld game that feels different, but feels really, really fun. I always like a race game. I like this sort of clear ending and the sort of pressure to get there first. I always find that fun. So my pick is going to be the Oracle of Delphi.
I am shocked, sir, that you would allow one of your own personal favorite games of all time to slip to me.
There are a number of
And
my
it-
favorite games here for sure, yeah.
No, you know what I'm thinking.
Take it.
You know what I'm thinking?
I think I know what you're thinking.
Yeah, you say, oh, there's a bunch of them I like on this list, but there's one that I cannot believe you picked a Feld game over this. My second pick, I am very excited to pick the Estates. This redo of Neu Hamat is kind of in some ways not similar to Bus, but for fans of people who like games like Bus, it is a mean auction-y game. It is a Capstone production that recently came out. It is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely one where your plans will go awry. A very devious sub 2-hour game, and one that anyone I think would enjoy at least playing it once, unless you don't like confrontation in your games, which I think if you listen to the show, at least to some degree, you have to probably like some of the stuff that's going on in the Estates. Mark picked Oracles of Delphi over the Estates, and you should all vote for me as a result.
I love the Estates. I love it. But some of the feedback I've gotten from having the Estates high on my top 50 lists, from people saying that they really, really don't like it, had me scared off by it. And certainly it's a game for me. I love it, but it's not a game for everybody. It is really, really tough. But it is one of the most exciting games that I play on a regular basis. It always gets my heart pumping.
Yep. And let us move on to my next pick, right? We're going to round it out. Mark did that whole preamble. He likes to talk for like a whole minute and then before he picks something. And I thought that he was going to pick this with his first pick, and I was going to congratulate him, and he got to the end of his preamble and he picked So Clover. The hottest game on this list is 100% Long Shot the Dice game. Selling out at Gen Con, no, my friend. This is on a rise. This is on a rise. Mark, I see your face. Long Shot the Dice game is a reimplementation of Long Shot. It is a roll and write game, a game of horse racing. I think this is the next Camel Up for the roll and write generation, but it has both the benefit of having some of the fun of a roll and write, but also some of the ridiculousness of allowing you to pull other horses back I think this will rise another 200, 300 places in the Board Game Geek hotness. It sold out at Gen Con. People were very excited. It had a very large booth. I do believe this is the hottest game on the list. Whether or not I like it more than So Clover, doesn't matter. But if you want to play Long Shot the Dice game, you should vote for me. Definitely super excited to be able to draft this in third. I think it's a value pick given its hotness.
I think it's neck and neck between So Clover and Long Shot the Dice game. I think it's a photo finish, to use a horse racing pun. But I just don't know if Long Shot has the staying power of So Clover in terms of the sustained heat. I'm into sustained heat, not flashing the pans.
All I'm saying is that So Clover is a 7.6 and Long Shot the Dice game is a 7.9. So if you're betting on horses, I don't know, kind of, there's 3K ratings for So Clover. Guess how many ratings there are for Long Shot? I haven't gotten, so let me refresh. 2.2K. Well, that's
actually closer than I expected, actually, to be honest with you. I was hoping that was going to be a big win for me, but not so much. All right. So third pick, right in the middle. This is the exact middle pick of our entire draft. So there's a lot of weight to this pick. This is the ballast for our entire draft. So who do you need to bring in when you need ballast, Nealon? Who's the ballast man? I'll give you a hint. He's also a doctor.
Is it Dr. Reiner Knizia?
It is Reiner Knizia. One of the greatest games of all time is Tigris and Euphrates. And you know what Knizia said after he created Tigris and Euphrates?
I love stealing it from Nealon that doing this.
He said, I can do this better. People said, what are you talking about? You just created a masterpiece. You know what he said? He said, I can do this better. I can do this better. Give me a couple of years. Give me a decade, maybe. I'm going to do this better. And he sure did.
It's funny though, Mark. I've played Tigris a lot recently, and I've just circled back around. I think Tigris is a better game. I think everyone's right, actually.
And so I'm going with Yellow and Yangtze. Tigris and Euphrates, those rivers are so played out. Who cares about the Tigris and the Euphrates? It's all about the Yellow and the Yangtze now. So Yellow and Yangtze is Knizia's reimagining of his own masterpiece, Tigris and Euphrates. Great, great, great game. Sands a little bit of the edges off while still keeping a very tight, very tough game. Yellow and Yangtze is my pick.
That's a great pick.
That
Just
one hurts.
Classic.
If that had made it back to me, it would definitely have been in this block. Okay, so I have two picks, and I think the first one is a little bit clearer than the other one again, but we're going to start off with Undaunted.
Kingdom Builder.
Yeah, with Kingdom Builder. Undaunted North Africa. Undaunted is a very hot franchise. In fact, an expansion won Best Game for Golden Geek, with some controversy last year, but certainly a game that people are still very, very excited in. Having played Undaunted, I think it is an excellent hybrid of deck building and wargaming, especially for people that are a little bit wargaming averse. Like, something about the buy-in to like traditional wargaming is a hard sell, but Undaunted gets you a lot of the way there while building in these very modern feeling mechanics and systems. It's a very cool, accessible version of that style of game, has a very slick feel, had a lot of fun with Undaunted. That feels like a safe pick to me. The next thing I'm going to go for is a game I've appreciated for a very, very long time. We spoke about Seven Wonders last week as a pillar of the board gaming world by virtue of the fact that it plays a very large group. It's a very easy to play game that can play 7 players. Similarly, Between Two Cities, I think, is an excellent, accessible, medium weight game that plays a large group and gets everyone talking. Like, by design, you are talking to your neighbor to your left constantly. You're talking to your neighbor to your right constantly. You're working with them cooperatively to build a city together. There's a little bit of back and forth, because are you trying to help the person to your left more in this round? You're trying to help the city to your right more next round. And cleverly, your score is going to be whichever one of the two cities scores the least. So you're definitely incentivized to help both sides. Such a clever design. I think it's really smart, and I've loved revisiting it ever since I played it for the very, very first time. That is Between Two Cities, my number 4 pick.
I find that what usually loses me these drafts is when I start going with my heart. So it's tough.
I never do that.
It's tough here. I know.
All the money.
You're very calculated. That's right. And yet, I have a hard time resisting this game. I was sort of convinced that it wouldn't last this long, and I'm a little bit tempted to let it run one more round, but I gotta take it now. I'm going with City of the Big Shoulders here. I'm hoping that the BGA implementation has gotten more people playing this game. City of the Big Shoulders is a game that sort of melds Euro games with 18xx games, does it in a really, really fantastic way. It's a game that can be tough to play because of the time commitment, but thankfully there's a implementation on BGA now that handles it really well. I really enjoy 18xx games, the uniqueness of that sort of niche of games, and obviously I like Euro games as well, and the way that it melds both of them is really, really good. There's a lot of different sort of player powers that you can get from the different businesses that you can control. Just a very clever combination of different styles of games. Very happy, at least on a personal level. I hope it doesn't lose me the draft, but very happy on a personal level to have City of the Big Shoulders as my fourth pick.
I'm not going to lie to you. I would have picked it.
Okay.
Next. I find myself similar to a normal game night for me halfway through the draft saying, oh, I need a Euro game to appeal to these normies. And I grow concerned because Yellow and Yangtze would have been great. Oracle of Delphi, again, not my favorite Feld, but it is a Feld. And then City of the Big Shoulders kind of does two times it a little bit with those who like the economic side of it and those who just want a Euro game. Though there is some crossover again with the estates. My prep involves like grouping these games together, which is to say, oh, this list has Whitehall Mystery and Spectre Ops and Fury of Dracula. So if one of these idiots, chooses a hidden movement game, I will one-up them with my hidden movement game and then prove even if they took the best hidden movement game, I will not acquiesce to that fact. So that's a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. That's how confident I am here in the mid-ground, and not because I'm stalling for time while I'm on the clock trying to figure out what Euro game I could possibly draft. It's hard, right? We have games like Torres, which I know has won awards a long time ago before I was alive, and Mexica, a more modern version of something in the same trilogy, but neither of them pop with modern audiences. They both have a little bit too much area control business happening than the Euro crowd loves. What to do but stick with the script. You know what I mean? You stick with the script. I've run out of my script. All right, so I have narrowed it down to 2 Euro games that I have not played either one of them, and I don't know where to go. And let's hope that I have chosen the right one. I'm going to go with the hotter one, assuming that our listeners are newer board gamers. This one comes to us from Fabio Lopiano, the designer of Kalimala, Ragusa, Zapotec. This is Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road, an absolutely rock-solid Euro game that has risen in the rankings over the years that it has come out in 2020. It has a beautiful board. It has a lovely production. As you can tell, I know nothing about how Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road plays, as I have not played a Euro game in many, many years. But this is a rock-solid Euro game, one that I'm happy to round out my list with, and one that, honestly, I'd really like to play. Both of you have this. One of you has this.
I do not have it.
I played it. It's great. It's good.
Yeah.
The other, well, I'm not going to tell you the other one I was thinking because there's still time. Now I have another problem.
Right.
It's always about rounding out these lists. I feel pretty good about my list going into this last round. What I find is that our audience devalues party games, which is why I was so shocked, hashtag so shocked by Mark's first pick of So Clover. I am going to go lighter than I may have wanted. With my pick, I will pick one of the better filler games that has come out. I'm going to pick QE from 2019. This is another auction game where you're allowed to bid anything that you want. The fun of this game is that no one has any currency, and you could literally bid $10 billion in the first round of the game, and from henceforth, everyone would be bidding less than $10 billion to try to make you lose the game. If you spend the most in the auctions, you lose the game. QE is a fantastic filler game, one that rounds out this collection in a way that I feel super great about. The interesting thing is that these games are pretty new. There's a lot of new happening on my list, so I'm okay with that. But that is my final pick, QE from 2019.
I'm having a hard time with my last pick here. I have a short list that I can go off of, but just picking City of the Big Shoulders has me scared now to go too much into games that I personally love. because, again, I think that's been my downfall. There are a couple of games here that I would definitely pick that jump out at me for personal choices, but I just don't know if they have enough appeal to the audience. So I'm going to go with the game that not only is highly rated, as is the fact that it's in the 600s on BoardGameGeek, but also, to use a term we've already used on this episode, was a progenitor to the hottest game of the year. I see Neelan putting his hands to his eyes because he's upset.
The one game that I was going to pick next, Mark?
So I've screwed Neelan twice, which, if I don't win the draft, is going to be plenty of solace. I'm going with Civilization: A New Dawn here. This was the game that Ark Nova sort of copied in terms of the way that the card row actions you don't take get stronger and stronger. A game that I played that didn't knock my socks off, but then I heard that the expansion does a lot to fix it, so I've since been looking for a copy of it and the expansion to try out.
It's a pity the expansion doesn't come with your pick, Mark.
Thank you, Neelan. Yes.
Look,
Preach.
Look, expansions are not on this list. No, they probably are on this list. But look, it's no use to have the expansion if you don't have the game, right? And I'm not going to use 2 picks on the expansion and the game, especially since the expansion is not rated here. So you acquire the game using my list, and then later on, you get the expansion. It's all set. So I'm going with Civilization: A New Dawn. If you were excited about Ark Nova, clearly this is a good pick for you.
It's an Ark Nova pick. That's amazing.
Oh, Mark. I was so prepared to just be like, oh yeah, I've had my pick highlighted for the last few minutes and just do it. Because I didn't think it was going to get picked. And I had a narrative built around it and everything. Oh, no.
It's Mad King Ludwig, right? So you can be
yeah, you gotta have
between
both,
two
both
of them,
right? Yeah.
You can skew old and go cribbage.
We left you Toshkalar.
That is wrong.
Fix it. My Little Scythe to vote for Scythe. I like taunting now that I can reveal what I was going to pick.
You haven't revealed it yet, right?
What I was going to pick?
Yeah, the other Euro. Is that what you're talking about? I thought you had 2 Euros that you were...
Yeah, I can't even remember now.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I have not revealed the other Euro I was going to pick.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here is a lovely little game, a very, very popular, meaty card game, Fort. This is very beloved. A lovely Kyle Farron art. Kellen, you shut your mouth.
What?
Incredible art by Kyle Farron. Have you guys heard of Root?
Oh, this is a pick for Root?
the incredible illustration work. A very, very thinky card game. So I think almost the perfect counterpoint to something like a 6 nimmt, to start off the evening. If you want to start getting thinky, you want to start getting chunky, you're going to be wanting to play Fort.
I think everybody's going to want to play Ark Nova, but nobody has it because it's so popular. And then you're like, okay, well, we got to play a game like Ark Nova. And then, obviously Civilization: A New Dawn is what we do.
I just want people to play the games on my list and not the...
But yeah, if you're a fan of Root, you got to give me the vote here.
Oh my
God, that goes without saying. Fantastic game here. That is my 5th pick.
Who's the art by again?
Yeah, it's by Kyle Farron.
Oh, okay.
Fantastic artist. One of my favorite artists. I've long said that Kyle Farron art is a boon to any game it's on.
Yep.
That's my pick. I'm sticking with it. So let's go down the lists as we've picked them. Let's start with Kellen's pick from first to last pick. Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, The Estates, Longshot, The Dice Game, Merv, Heart of the Silk Road, and QE. Mark's list is So Clover, The Oracle of Delphi, Yellow and Yangtze, City of the Big Shoulders, and Civilization: A New Dawn. And my list is 6 nimmt, Bus, Undaunted North Africa, Between Two Cities, and Fort.
And if you want to hear what we think of who is going to win this draft, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/BoardGameBarrage, where we are about to go off the record and talk openly off the record.
And yeah, if you want to vote on the list to stand a chance at winning that $50 gift card for a board game retailer of your choice. You can head to boardgamebarrage.com/draft, pick which list you think is the best collection of 5 games, and you'll be put into the running. But I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the show. Stick around for the Off the Record if you want to hear what we think about each other's picks. You can follow us on all of our social media. That is on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can please come hang out in the Discord. The Discord always gets popping after the drafts as people berate us or celebrate our choices. You can head over to boardgamebarrage.com/Discord to come chat to us about the games that we've picked. Thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro music. What's on your mind, kid? Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye. That is Town 66. Save the last 6, and maybe get yourself some 7s. Triple 7s, Mark. Do you know what that means?
That's a Vegas thing. That's a Vegas that you hit a jackpot thing.
Yeah, you would think that, you ungodly man.
What does it mean?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's like it's like God. It's a jackpot.
Really?
Well, I mean, I thought it was.
I mean, it might be. I've never.
What
heard
does
that.
777 mean spiritually? It's the sign of divine guidance. Yeah.
Is
Oh,
it
really?
Christian? Oh, I didn't realize it was.
Well, nobody's surprised you didn't know, Nealon.
Yeah, Neil, no one
Yes.
would be surprised.
Heathen.
That's right. Mark and I will ally against you there.
That's right. On all things godly.
It's possible it's just like because 666 is the bad one,
That's
that
what it
777
seems
is the good one.
Right.
Yeah. So we might guess. Wait till you get to 88.
Okay.